Hello, everybody, and welcome to Away Games, a Chicago Cubs and baseball podcast hosted by two comedians who live in New York but love the Cubs nonetheless. I am one of them. My name is Adam Mamawala, and I am here with myself. That's right, Kevin has a lot of stuff going on this week, so you're going to hear Kevin a little bit later in this episode. He had a chat with our fellow prospect nerd and an expert, Greg Huss. Greg Huss, you may know from Northside Bound and Cubs on Deck. They had a chat about prospects, but before we get to that interview, I'm going to talk a little bit about what has happened in the past week. What happened for me personally is that I was in Los Angeles and then Hawaii, and I fortunately missed a good chunk of the Cubs West Coast road trip, at least the early part where they played the Angels. Not so fun. But let's talk about it. As I record this, we are coming off a frankly very satisfying win over the Pirates last night on Pride Night. Our good pal Ken Schultz was there, repping his number 23 Rhino number Pride jersey, which is frankly a very good look. And the Cubs got a nice 11-3 victory over the, yes, you heard it right, the first place Pittsburgh Pirates. Yes, the Pirates are still in first place. It would be really nice if the Cubs could rattle off a couple more victories against them, but we'll get to that a little bit later. So, when last we recorded, I believe I was about to head out of town, and we were kind of in the midst of this road trip where the Cubs had started off pretty well. They won the first 2 of 3 games against San Diego. We were hoping that they would take that next game, win 3 out of 4. They did not. They lost 5-0 to the Padres. And then they went into Anaheim against an Angels team that is fine and just really, other than the one game in which they were up 4-0, really did not have a particularly good showing at all. Those losses were 7-4, 6-2, and 3-1. Like I said, I fortunately did not get to watch a lot of those games. I did, however, get to check in on the games against the Giants. Stroman continues to be fantastic. And then Hendricks on Saturday pitched certainly the best game since he's come back. Arguably, I think probably his best game in at least a few years. And I got to tell you, as cool as it was to see Alec Mills throw his no-hitter, as cool as it was to see Zambrano throw his back in 2008, to have seen Kyle Hendricks actually throw a no-hitter would have been among the most fantastic things I could imagine happening, especially in this iteration of the Cubs where we just don't have a lot to cheer about sometimes. Hendricks was throwing a no-hitter through 7 2/3, gave up a double, and man, how satisfying would that have been to see the final Cub from that classic Cubs team get that done, especially as a guy who, Kevin and I have talked about this a lot before, has never been an all-star despite putting up all-star numbers in several years, but either voting didn't pan out or he had a stronger second half than a first half. And it's kind of a weird thing where he means so much to us. I think he's very well respected amongst baseball fans, but in terms of some of the bigger accomplishments that you might have, those have not been things that have happened for him. And seeing him get a no-hitter would have been really cool. Obviously, as we recall, in 2017, Hendricks took I think it was a perfect game into the 9th inning until it was broken up by a home run from fucking Hazelbaker. Well, it's always someone like that. It's never not that. There's always the Jack Sawinskis tormenting us. But Cubs lost the finale 13-3. It was not particularly close, obviously, and that kept their fairly, I'm trying to think of the right adjective for it, but I'm going to go annoying, their incredibly annoying streak of not being able to win 3 straight games, which now, as I record this on June 14th, dates back to pretty much exactly 2 months ago. It has been 2 months since the Cubs won 4 straight games, or 3 straight games, I should say. They had beaten the Dodgers in the final game of that series and then won 3 straight against the A's, who I'm going to talk about a little bit later. Quite a story there last night. But yeah, I was thinking about this recently in terms of like why it is so frustrating that the Cubs can't seem to string wins together. it goes without saying that, look, if the Cubs could win 2 out of 3 all the time, they would be one of the best teams in baseball. They are clearly not that. But if you're going to go out and get swept by teams, you also have to be able to sweep teams to make those games up. I think that's like fundamentally what the issue is here. And I would have to go back through their schedule and look, but just off the top of my head, the Cubs have for sure been swept more than they have swept anyone this year. And I think the A's sweep is the only sweep that the Cubs have had. It's that thing in baseball where when you play so many 3-game series, right? If you're playing a rival, and this is a perfect example, right? The Cubs are playing the Pirates right now. They won the first game last night. If they win the next 2 games, these Chicago Cubs, the 2023 Cubs, who are under 500, who have not won 3 straight in 2 months, those same Chicago Cubs would be 3.5 games back out of first place. That is a fact. Now, are the Brewers and Reds in between them? Yes, they are. But if the Cubs win the next 2 games, they will be 3.5 games behind the Pirates, who probably at that point would still be in first place. And the point I'm making here is that when you play a 3-game series, the only way to really make up significant ground, if you're a team like the Cubs, who is behind by a decent margin, is to sweep some of those series. If you win 2 of 3, it sounds good, but you're just making up 1 game. And if this Cubs team is going to do anything, they have to string some wins together. And I say that because, among other things, the Oakland A's, who have been the worst team in baseball and are still, they've won 7 straight, and they still have less than 20 wins. They are now 19-50. They were 12-50, and were on pace to be the worst. The team with the worst record since the 1899 Cleveland Spiders. Shout out to Pat Hughes for going on quite a long tangent about the Cleveland Spiders, who finished, I believe, 20-134 back in 1899. But the Oakland A's have won 7 in a row, and if the A's can win 7 in a row, the A's, who are basically a AAA team, there is absolutely no reason that the Cubs cannot win 3 in a row. You start to wonder if it's like in their heads at this point, if they are aware of that stat as well and just can't get over the hump. But last night in Oakland, as we kind of bounce around the league a little bit, the A's fans, they staged a in-person boycott? Is that how you would describe it? Usually a boycott means not doing something. In this case, they did do something. They went to the game. There were almost 30,000 people at the Coliseum, which if you watch any of the Cubs-A's games, you would know that has not been the case. Their attendance has been pretty horrible. Let me see if I can look it up as I'm talking about this. Their attendance last night was... it was 27,759. Prior to that, just the game before on Monday, less than 5,000 people in the stands. Less than 5,000 people. If I go back through the A's home games, they have not had more than 10,000 people at a single game since Friday, May 26th. Against the Astros. There were 13,000 people there. That's the last time that they had that many people in the stands, and I'm sad to say it was probably plenty of Astros fans. That was when the Astros were tweeting mean things from their account, because they are the Brewers of the American League. They're just assholes, and their social media people reflect that. But pretty interesting stuff. There were people chanting "Sell the team." Everybody behind home plate was wearing shirts that said "Sell." Will it make a difference? Probably not, but it was kind of nice to see that amount of unity. And I'm not suggesting that Cubs fans should or would do that, but I know for one that our good friend Ken Schultz would love for the Cubs and the Ricketts to sell the team, and for fire Jed, sell the team. That has become Ken's mantra, and I think ours as well to some degree. I don't know how Howard Stern or people like that do it, or it's usually more narcissistic people like Mike Francesa, but the idea of just talking to yourself for 4 hours, it's crazy. I mean, I'm going to need to take some calls right now, frankly. I don't know that I can keep this up on my own. A couple other Cubs notes that I want to talk about as I bounce around here. We saw an interesting tweet. I got to give Kevin credit for this one, that Marcus Stroman implied that he has reached out to the Cubs, or had reached out to the Cubs about an extension, and that did not happen, or was not met with interest. And Kevin quite astutely responded to that tweet. You have now had the full Chicago Cubs or modern Chicago Cubs experience. And there's been a lot of discourse about this recently, especially as the Cubs have been scuffling about, is Stroman going to be traded, or is he somebody that you try to extend? Obviously, I think we should try to extend him, given how well he has pitched. It's going to take a lot, but if you're trying to build a team around defense, and particularly infield defense, which the Cubs have done, who would you want more than Marcus Stroman, who has just gone out and dealt pretty much every game? There just can't. I'm trying to talk myself into there not being another sell-off, and I hope that that's because the Cubs actually make a push here and get at least back into the running for the division, so much so that Hoyer is either unable to or chickens out of trading people at the deadline. But I very much hope that is on the table, and I don't know. If not, can we pull like a Yankees with Chapman thing where we trade Stroman and then try to sign him after this season? Probably unrealistic, and he's gonna want too much. But anyway, so quick look forward before I wrap things up here. The Cubs have 2 more games against the Pittsburgh Pirates. Those games will feature pitching matchups of Drew Smyly against someone named Bido. Sounds like a dog. I'm not sure who that is. I don't mean that in an insulting way, but I do not know who this person is. Osvaldo Bido is what I'm going to guess. And then we've got Stroman going tomorrow in the series finale. So, again, would love to see the Cubs take 2 of 3. Would be over the moon if the Cubs were able to sweep this series and get to within 3.5 of the Pirates, and would probably be, I think the Pirates are up a game and a half on the Brewers, so that would basically be 3.5 within first place. Then the Baltimore Orioles, the surprisingly good Baltimore Orioles, coming into town this coming weekend. We got three-day games, the classic 2:20 starts, and then the early 12:05 Central Time start, so that all the Peacock watchers, I mean, who hasn't subscribed to Peacock purely for the Sunday baseball? Just you love to see the sheer amount of Bartman references every time the Cubs play, even not against the Marlins or when it's relevant. So yeah, we got a Baltimore Sunday finale on Peacock, and then right back at it. So we're getting these divisional games here. 3 more at the Pirates. That's next Monday through Wednesday, and then the London series happens, which in another timeline, Kevin and I would have been at those games in 2020. Sadly, we will not be there this year unless we win that mattress contest, but I don't think we have. I think we would know by now. So that is what I've got for you. I'm going to go ahead and throw it over to Kevin and Greg.
Hey everybody, I'm Kevin McCaffrey. You know that. This is Adam is not here. We hope he settles all his legal issues as quickly as possible and gets back on the air. But I am joined by a lovely guest today, a friend of the show now. I think if you're multiple times on the show, you're that. And he is the host of Cubs on Deck and one of the best prospect writers and followers in the biz. Give it for Greg Huss, everybody. How's it going, Greg?
Good, man. I may not be as talented as Adam. I may not be as good looking as Adam, but I know prospects better than Adam. So I'll take that.
The amount of ground you make up in prospect knowledge is getting you close in any number of areas, and I don't know what other talents you have, so you could be, I won't pass any judgment there, but I'll ask Adam after the fact if he has any burning prospect questions.
There we go.
He's more of a major league guy, and I was going to ask you, in a year like this, because I feel like you've always been obviously a big prospect guy, and also where else should people follow you before I get into things? You got the podcast, Cubs on Deck.
Yeah, so I've got Cubs on Deck. You can listen to that podcast wherever you guys listen to away games. We've kind of changed our YouTube setup, so now we got a YouTube kind of visual. If you guys want to see our beautiful faces, you can check me and Greg Zumak and Brian Smith out over there, and some of the broadcasters, obviously. And you can follow me on Twitter at Out of the Vines. And then I'm the one of the co-founders of Northside Bound, where we only talk about Cubs prospects. It's the most niche topic for a blog of all time.
It really is, but you've gone so deep into it in a way that I sincerely appreciate. You got your own stat bash now, the offensive stat. So You've only gone deeper and farther sensual baseball as the more I've known you. But you're consuming and following so much minor league baseball now. Does a major league season like this, does that make things easier for you, where you sort of don't have to be involved as a viewer of the major league level as much? Does it let you have more of a life otherwise, or is there not really an upside?
Well, I'll tell you two things. One, yeah, it does, like, because I always, like, whenever I go on different shows talking about prospects and stuff, like I'm quick to point out that I'm a Cubs fan, like, right, like I follow the Cubs system, but like I'm a Cubs fan like for my entire life, So it sucks to see a crappy product put on the field at the major league level, but you're right, it does make it a little bit easier to turn my attention to the minor league system, because I can still be a Cubs fan and follow the minor league system and not have to worry about watching the Cubs major league team all that much.
Right.
But I will say though that, like, right now, more than for as toxic of a place as Twitter is,
yes.
For some reason, like it like this year has been extraordinarily toxic, and I think that it's kind of spilling over. I've seen it in, like, whenever I'm posting one, like, positive thing about, like, some like third reliever in South Bend, like, not even like a prospect, not even a quote unquote prospect, but like some guy had a good game. It's like, oh yeah, but like he's gonna suck as soon as he makes it up to the big leagues, and it's like, I'm not saying he won't, dude. Like,
right, but I'm commenting on a thing that has objectively already taken place in a positive sense. So that is allowed to be okay and good.
It's been wild, dude. It's been wild. Like I've seen it a lot today as we're recording today with the news that Ed Howard is getting called up, and like the constant Ed Howard is a bust. Ed Howard is a bust, and it's like, I mean, he might. What I keep saying is, like, yeah, he might be. He might ultimately be, like, he might ultimately fizzle out. He might ultimately be a bust.
Right.
But you can't say it right now because, like, he's been injured for the last year.
He's a 2020 first rounder who's coming out of Chicago high school, high school 2020 first rounder.
Yeah.
Didn't get as many at bats. Didn't get the sort of experience that almost all of the other first round picks in a draft would be getting. But yeah, there's news about him today. So tell me what's going on with him.
Yeah, so he has missed a little over a year now. He's been out because he went down with that really gruesome injury, hip injury. When he was with South Bend last year, it was just a routine ground ball. He was trying to beat it out running down the line, and he kind of, like, was trying to avoid contact with the first baseman, went down, had a hip injury, which is, like, that's not a common, like, you don't see hip injuries in baseball all that often.
No, or among teens, really.
Yeah,
I mean, it's an old person injury typically.
Yeah, so he's been walking around with his cane, I guess. But so he just returned. He just got the call. He's been spending a lot of time down in Arizona rehabbing, and he was returning to South Bend where he finished his season last year. And so now that he's in South Bend, he can kind of hit the ground running a little bit. Hopefully, like, my hope with him returning from injury is that, like, it looks a whole lot more like what we've seen from Miguel Amaya, where Miguel Amaya missed a lot of time because of Tommy John surgery and because of a foot problem, and he came back stronger and better than ever. You know what I mean? PCA was the same deal, right? Where PCA was injured for a long time, came back stronger. Hopefully we see that with Ed Howard too.
Yeah, Amaya, I mean, was a guy who, I mean, he was a top 100 prospect a few years ago, right? But he has barely caught in years until this year, and it seems like his body and skills caught up better than you could hope for to this point. And yeah, Ed Howard, I guess you could say he was offensively disappointing, but it wasn't altogether surprising that he was at that point. And now, I mean, the guy still cannot be old. I mean, he's what, 21 maybe?
Yeah,
at this
he's still
point?
only like 21 years old.
Yeah,
and you're right. Like his one full season of baseball was for the Myrtle Beach Pelicans back in 2021, and it was like that was an aggressive assignment, right?
Mm-hmm.
Him being assigned there on opening day, like, he was facing college arms from the SEC, and he was a 19-year-old kid who missed his senior year of high school baseball,
right?
And so he performed not very well, like, statistically, but still got an aggressive promotion up in 2022 up to South Bend. So, like, even though the stats weren't there, obviously the Cubs front office liked, and development staff liked what they saw from him enough to continue climbing the ladder with him. And, like, he looked he looked better in 2022 early on in that season. Again, like it was such a small sample size
Right.
that you had to go off the eye test, and the eye test, like he looked better.
Well, and like you said, PCA, who was in that same draft, he missed basically almost all the time he was a Met before he got over here, and that's looked good since then. Also, I saw in terms of just today news, before you give us a just overview of how things are, I saw that Ryan Jensen is up to Iowa. He was the 2019 first rounder, is now up to AAA.
Yeah, he's up to Iowa. He was converted to relief earlier this year because he started off the year as a starter. He was added to the 40-man roster this past offseason. And now he's like a full-time reliever, whatever that means in the Cubs organization. Because like a full-time, what is a reliever? You know what I mean?
Yeah, what is a reliever? Call in, please, at Away Games Pod. Please holler at us. Tell us what a reliever is. Yeah, I mean, like it has been interesting how quickly it seems like they've shifted a lot of guys to full relief. I guess quickly within this year. Ryan Jensen, I mean, Jensen's a guy where it was a late first rounder, but you got a first rounder who 4 years later is now hitting AAA relief, which is not, I don't think you would say, hopefully it'll be great, but not, things haven't gone perfectly swimmingly for him up to this point. He's got a huge arm. It seems like it just scouting the stat line a little bit. It seems like the strikeouts are finally a little up for a guy with that arm.
Yeah, he's been his entire development path has been so strange, man. Like it's been so weird with Ryan Jensen. He for a while, he just like in past years, he just couldn't put hitters away. Like he was still sometimes racking up the strikeouts, but like he was using a lot of pitches. He would miss in the zone quite a bit. Like he wouldn't eat around the edges, right? He'd be in the zone or he'd be missing by quite a bit. Where like a guy would just take a slider that's way off the plate. You know what I mean?
Not competitive.
Stuff's good though. Yeah, exactly. And so I think this change to relief was a long time coming, but like we've seen that with a lot of guys in the system, right? Like you mentioned, Luke Little was recently converted from starter to reliever.
Big boy.
He's a big dude. He's a big dude. He's in Tennessee. Daniel Palencia was starting in Tennessee and then went on the development list, came back as a reliever to Iowa. Like he came back and was promoted and has looked pretty damn good in Iowa as a reliever. And really like what I said it on our podcast, I think a couple episodes ago with Brian, that like what that tells me is that the Cubs are ultra confident in their ability to like develop other starting pitchers because like Palencia and Luke Little and Ryan Jensen, those are all top 30 prospects in the system that are starting pitchers. So if you're converting like those top 30 guys from starting to relieving, then you have a lot of belief in like the non-top 30 guys that you can make them something as a starting pitcher. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Because I think that's been a thing. Obviously, the farm system in general for the Cubs, the pitching, certainly, it would be hard to do worse than the Cubs did for about a generation developing pitching. Yeah. But it does seem like they finally do have guys who, I mean, Justin Steele, obviously off the top, Hayden Wesneski, not really, I mean, they're developing him now, but he came over from the Yankees. But it does get frustrating at a point where you're like, every pitching prospect who we love might be a reliever. Like, and that's fine. Like relieving, you need good relievers, and it's really fun to have these waves of fun, cool relievers, but someone has to be a starter someday. Yes. And the fact that you're saying that, it does seem like reading between the lines, the fact that they did, as you said, Little, Jensen, Palencia, and Riley Thompson, I think was another one.
That was another, like, what's a reliever? So he was a starting pitcher, and then he was converted to relief, and now he's back as a starting pitcher. I don't understand what they're doing with Riley Thompson. I'm kind of pissed off at them for messing around with them. I don't know, but
Dark Side Greg, get on Twitter.
But I think that like it's if you don't have confidence, whether it's confidence that is not warranted or it is warranted, if you don't have that confidence in your ability to develop starting pitchers, you're going to ride out Daniel Palencia as a starter as long as you possibly can.
You would think.
The fact that they're not, it gives me confidence. Whether or not it's blind confidence or not, but you are right that it's like you got Hayden Wesneski that he came up and it's like, all right, is he going to bounce back? He's going to come back to like what we saw from him last year as opposed to this year. Keegan Thompson obviously has been a nightmare this year.
What is up there? Because that's a guy who and Keegan Thompson's obviously was dominant for a reliever for about a year plus, really. When he was relieving, he was very good. But this is also like, he's not a low round pick. That's like getting a third round pick. You hope a third round pick can get to just being a successful reliever. It's not a huge stretch to hope for that. And we saw him be so good in relief. And I saw, I think probably from your Twitter, that AAA hasn't gone well.
He's been rough, dude. I don't know, man. He is, so from a prospect nerd perspective, it's really weird with Keegan Thompson, because when he was a prospect, he was very much like that starting pitch, like very clearly a starting pitcher.
Right.
He had 6 different pitches. He had the nibble on the edges. It was a like mix of pitches that made him good. And then all of a sudden, then he went down. He was injured for quite some time once he made it to the upper levels of the minors. And then next thing you know, he's in Chicago and he's got like only 2 pitches that he's utilizing. And it's like electric stuff. And it's like, where did this come? Like, this is not even the same human being that I watched pitch the past 4 years in the minors. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. I remember reading the draft profile on him and being like, okay, this seems like a maybe mid-late rotation starter, sort of mid-level innings eater. And then I remember seeing him in spring training, and who knows what spring training guns, but seeing the fastball at 97 and being like, who is this?
Yeah.
What happened here? And then I guess what happened the other way, but yeah.
Yeah, well, and then it gets difficult, right? Because you're looking at like that year and a half stretch where he was damn good as a multi-inning reliever. And you're like, was that not legit? But I was looking at the stuff, and the stuff looked legit. So I don't, honestly, like, he is a mystery to me, just because the way that I viewed him coming up through the system is the opposite of what we saw from him at the major league level.
Where he found his success, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that is especially with pitching. I mean, you see it with hitters a little bit, but more so with pitching, where it's like, development does not stop once you reach the major leagues. And like with pitching, it gets even like more intense, because like I look at Adbert Alzolay, right? And Adbert Alzolay coming up through the system for years, he was known as a four-seam fastball and a really good curveball, like a really good curveball as a prospect. Now he doesn't ever throw a curveball. He's a sinker slider guy.
Yeah.
And like, it's literally not the same pitcher that I watched as he came up.
It's really weird and hard to, when things like that happen with pitchers, it's hard to ever feel like you learn anything. Because also Alzolay was a guy who I remember in the, would this have been after 2021? I forget whether it was after 2021, maybe. I remember hearing Jed talk about in the postseason press conference, like, we found a starter in Adbert Alzolay.
Yeah.
Like, the fact that, like, we're confident that that's a starter now. And he's not, but that's one where it seems exciting as a reliever now. It's not even just like he's a useful reliever. This guy could be the closer. This guy could be a high leverage arm. That's great. That's high value. No real notes on where Alzolay seems to be at the moment. And he was a guy who just, like, was good when he was healthy, but just didn't seem like he could hold up as a starter, long term, I guess. And then I guess, as you're saying about the people there, that the Cubs must be confident in some starters coming up. There's a guy who I like this is why you follow Greg on Twitter. This is a guy who I do follow prospects in probably the upper 5% of baseball fans.
100%,
but quite a large margin away from you. I did not know Brody McCullough existed until a couple of weeks ago, and now I'm seeing stats, and I saw that he's a 10th rounder from 2022, so I don't feel too bad not knowing him. But tell me what up with this fella.
Yeah, so I can go off on how much I like Brody McCullough, but I'll start by saying, like, take all of this with a grain of salt to a certain degree, because he's in low A, he's in single A in Myrtle Beach, and he's a college draft pick. So whenever you have a college draft pick in the lowest level of the minor, like the lowest level of full season ball, then you're getting weird results, because you have that weird mix of like 18-year-olds playing with 23-year-olds.
It's the flip of what you were saying Ed Howard was dealing with. He's basically pitching against a bunch of Ed Howards.
Exactly. So take it with a grain of salt to a certain degree, but he also looks the part. I think Brody McCullough is really good at what I was talking about with Keegan Thompson, hitting the edges of the zone, right? So with his fastball and slider, Brody McCullough is really, really good at dotting that fastball right on the edges wherever he wants it. And the slider is out of the zone every single time, in a good way. Like, I mean that in a good way. where he's not leaving it over the heart of the plate. Like he's making that like a true chase pitch.
Yeah, competitive
And
pitches. Yeah, making the batter make a decision.
and that's different than what we saw from Cade Horton during his small amount of time in Myrtle Beach, because Cade Horton just had the nastiest stuff where like he was literally leaving fastballs and sliders down the middle of the plate, and hitters couldn't touch it because it was too nasty. You know what I mean?
He's the big boy a year too old on the little league team, basically.
Yeah,
Just it's just like, all right, go away. Yeah,
exactly. So then we saw that like adjustment, like a very small adjustment period for Horton when he made it up to South Bend. McCullough is different, where he kind of locates his pitches. His stuff is kind of nasty too.
what is the stuff from him, from what you've seen at least?
Yeah, it's not touching that upper 90s like what we've seen from Cade Horton. I mean, it's low 90s. Maybe he can touch the mid 90s on occasion. But it's the fastball slider that he lives off of. Every once in a while, he'll drop a changeup in there. But it's generated, and for me, it's the way in which he pitches that makes him like a little bit nastier. His delivery, like I dig dudes that like do stuff that are weird, right? Like I like
the same. I love an outlier thing.
Yes, like
whatever your thing is. I mean, I love Kyle Ryan because he released the ball from the furthest toward first base out of anybody. It's like that's a bizarre, weird thing, but he was doing a thing no one else did. You know, So he's being weird. You're telling me in some way.
He kind of like he hides the ball for quite a while. Like, he hides the ball behind his like hip-ish area. I don't know how to describe it. Hip area.
Yeah.
And so it kind of, I'd imagine that it makes the fastball look a few miles an hour faster, because hitters are picking it up later. And that type of stuff is what I like. The weirdness, the quirks are what like I'm looking more recently and like identifying in certain players, because that development is so weird once you reach the major. Like if you turn in from a fastball curveball guy to a sinker slider guy, okay, that the pitch mix might differ, but are you still doing something that's weird and wonky? And Brody McCullough does that. He throws the ball a little bit. It's not like you're not looking at it and seeing Kyle Ryan, but it's just like it's something different. And like that can follow all the way to the majors and continue at the major league level, regardless of what pitches you're throwing.
Well, we've seen. I mean, Justin Steele. It doesn't look like anything's that weird. Yeah. And the fastball, it's good velocity for a starting left-hander, but it's not what it was out of the bullpen or anything. He's not throwing 98 at you, but for some reason, no one ever hits him hard for over a year. So he has this, it's sort of like Justin Steele does a weird thing where no one hits the ball hard, but I don't know I can't see the weirdness between him and there in the same way you can see with a lot of pitchers. But he's another guy who was just, the numbers were always good coming through the minors. He was never terribly heralded as a prospect. I mean, he was a well-thought-of prospect, but not like, he wasn't on top 100 lists really or anything. And he's just continued to be good.
Well, I remember, I mean, I know Justin Steele is a friend of the show here, but I remember talking with Justin Steele when he was down. So it was after he got called up to the bigs and he worked as a reliever successfully. And I think he hit the injured list for a very short period of time. And when he came back, he was working as a starting pitcher. And when he was working as a starting pitcher, I got the chance to talk to him when they were playing in AAA over in Columbus when I was living over there. And I interviewed him on the field and was chatting with him for a while. And I was asking him about that slider because, again, coming up through the system, Steele was a four-seam fastball curveball guy, and the curveball was really, really good.
Yeah.
And I was like, dude, where did this slider come? Like, what's up with this slider? And I remember Justin Steele telling me that he learned the slider from his brother. Like, it wasn't like something that he learned in the pitch lab or down on the farm or with the pitching coach. It was from his brother that he.
I mean, with his brother, might have been near an actual farm though, somewhere in Mississippi. Like it could have been the That's farm. Incredible.
Yeah. And so he was talking about that, and I was like this baseball is wild, man. Like he's literally learning this pitch from his brother, and now he's going up to the big leagues, and that's his go-to offering is that slider. You know what I mean? So it's wild. It's wild. I'm loving seeing what Justin Steele's been doing.
It's been super fun just to have a guy who, I mean, if the All-Star game was today, he should be on it, and hopefully he comes back. Hopefully he comes back healthy soon. We've gotten to a lot of pitchers. Tell me who, like, what updates do you feel like are necessary at this? I don't know, whatever we're at, the quarter point, the third point, getting closer to the third, I guess. What are you feeling are the most significant developments, good or bad, you've seen hitter-wise?
Yeah, I think that One thing is, I think we're looking at now where Owen Casey has an argument to be made that he's the second best prospect in the system behind PCA.
Yeah.
The dude is 20. He is 20 years old in Double A,
And a Canadian 20.
and is a Canadian. And honestly, that does make a difference.
It does, yeah. Well, like we were saying with Ed Howard, right? I mean, it's just you don't get the at bats.
Yeah, you don't get the at bats. You're like, I always point this out. Like he was taking fly balls in like a warehouse. Like he wasn't taking fly balls outside because it was like 10 degrees in Canada. So what he's doing is kind of wild, honestly. Like he's in Double A. The exit velo numbers are outrageous.
Talking about doing weird stuff. That I love to see that. Love to see the max over 117 plus. I mean, there's just like how many humans on earth can hit a baseball that hard? And it's like double digits. Like
I read it was RM Layton who writes over for justbaseball.com, and he was writing about Owen Casey's exit velo numbers, and it was I don't have it in front of me. I don't know off the top of my head, but it was like only 5 players have hit a ball the max exit velo that Owen Casey has in the major leagues this year, like which is crazy.
And you know their names. I mean, they're like it's not they're
Aaron Judge and
it's like Judge, Stanton if he's ever healthy hits one that way. Maybe Shohei gets in there.
Yeah,
maybe maybe Yandy Diaz hits one into the ground that hard. He's lifting them more this year, but it seems like there is a very cool opportunity for a ceiling there with Owen Casey, which is exciting because I like good solid baseball players. You should have a lot of them. I feel like that is something the Cubs have lacked both in terms of their free agent pursuits and in terms of what has been developing on the farm is someone who can can you hit 40 bombs? Can I stick you in the middle of a lineup or at the top of a rotation?
Dude, I literally just, I was on with Zumac on our last episode and was talking about this exact topic because we got a mailbag question asking about like, where is like the blue chip player in this organization? And my point to answer that was that like right now, you look at the Cubs major league team right now, and you got Nico, you got Seiya Suzuki, you got Patrick Wisdom, you got a whole bunch of guys that are like good baseball players, right? Like they're good players. Like Nico Porter is a good 7-hitter on a World Series team.
He is good, but he's embodied sort of the opposite of the toxicity of Twitter, I think, where people are like, Nico, all-star, and maybe adding the stolen base element this year has been exciting. But he's an average hitter. Like he is an average major league hitter, and he hasn't shown much that he can exceed that, and he plays gold glove defense. He's a great leader. He steals bases. These are all great things. But we've almost been like starved to the point where there's a sandwich here and we're like, I'm gonna throw up. I'm so full. Where, it's like, no, Nicos are great.
Yes,
you need to have something that peaks higher than that, maybe though, as a championship team.
Yeah, and like having a team full of 5 through 8 hitters is very nice to have. It's very nice to have, right?
Sure.
But you need somebody to slot into at a 3 and 4 hole in the lineup. And I think that so the question back to our show that we were talking about is like, where are these guys in the Cubs system? And I think PCA is an interesting case. He's at this point, he's a pretty consensus top 20 guy in all of baseball, which is that's an elite prospect. If you're a top 20 guy in all of baseball, you're an elite prospect. With the bat, it's just kind of it's weird with PCA. My point though is that if you have a shit ton of these guys that are like the 150 range in all of baseball, if you have a bunch of those guys, odds are one of them will land. You're going to have 3 of them that won't pan out at all. You're going to have 2 of them that are going to be just good players. And you might just have one that is really, really good. Owen Casey looks like he might be that elite middle of the bat lineup type guy.
Yeah.
I know the strikeouts are outrageous. Like the strikeouts are super, super high, over 30%. But the Southern League in Double A, they were using these pre-tacked baseballs.
Yeah, and for people who don't know what that means, they're just automatically sticky stuffed, basically, right?
Yeah, and I heard from many people, both players and other folks, that were saying this is absolutely absurd, right? Like the fact that they're using hitters don't stand a chance, and so the fact that Owen Casey was putting up those numbers, the strikeout rates were obviously high, but I think a lot of that, the Southern League strikeout rate, as a whole, was 29%, as a league rate, which is
I mean, that is, if you see a pitcher with a 29% strikeout rate, that is an interesting pitcher of all of a sudden.
Yeah.
So it's turning, it's turning everyone into Jordan Wicks for basically across the league. And that is part of why the Cubs, Ben Brown went up to AAA, right? Was to get him away from that, to be like, okay, is this really legit? That real?
Yeah, exactly. So I'm Owen Casey's always gonna. I have, since the day the Cubs acquired him, in the trade, I've thrown out the Kyle Schwarber comparisons, and I think that, like, even still to this day, those comparisons are warranted, right? Like, you're riding a really thin line as far as, like, who is he? Like, even this year with Schwarber, right? Like, Schwarber's batting like 112 this year.
Really, it's really down so there. Bad. It does not look great coming off a National League Home Run Championship and a run to the World Series. And it's one of those things where I remember Schwarber also sucked bad for the first month of last year, and then he hit like 16 homers in May or something. Like, so he's always got that streak in him. But with a hitter like that, with the Joey Gallos, the Kyle Schwarbers, it is. It's also, not only is it an exciting skill set, but it's really, and Casey's not on the doorstep here, right? Like, this is going to be a while.
Yeah.
But it's something the Cubs don't have in their lineup. And if you don't sign Shohei Ohtani, I don't even know how to get it in the major leagues, basically, right now.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what Nico Horner and whatever this new age Dansby Swanson is, and the Nick Madrigals of the world pairs well with. It pairs well with a guy who has light tower power that might swing and miss a whole lot. Like, he does. He's going to swing and miss a whole lot. But if you balance the lineup right, like, the Nico and the Owen Casey balance each other out. You know what I mean? I think that's something where, like, even like the 2017 through 2020 Cubs they ran into that problem where, like, they were all the same type of hitter, generally speaking, outside of Anthony Rizzo, which we can talk about that for hours. But
I'll do a big KMS. Yeah, he's local to me now. He's one borough over, and I miss him every day.
But so I just think that Owen Casey we need to keep talking about him. One other guy that needs mentioning is Moises Ballesteros, who reminds me a lot of Owen Casey in a lot of ways in terms of his pitch recognition skills, in terms of his ability to go the opposite way with authority. But Moises Ballesteros is in low A, and he's striking out less than what he walks. I don't, the numbers, I think he's right around 18% for walk, 16% for strikeout, which is one of the lowest in the entire system as a 19-year-old catcher in low A. Like, that's not common at all. So
no, it's a bizarre skill set to be that patient. Also, when you have that bat, it's not like a Nick Madrigal bat being that patient.
Yeah, he's working his way up. I'm trying to find a way to get him into my top 10 prospects in the system. I think it's gonna be close. We're coming out with new updated rankings at Northside Bound, probably later this month, before the draft happens. And I'm trying to find a way to get Ballesteros in there. It might be tough because Miggy Amaya is clear as day back in my top 10, like very easily. So
he might lose his prospect eligibility before too long. So
true, I got to give it some time.
Yeah. And my final specific question before we let you go, Pablo Aliendo, while we're talking about catchers, he's a guy who he's 22. He's up in Tennessee, I think. And another catcher, all of a sudden. There's a couple of interesting catchers in the system.
Yeah, the Cubs did a really good job of, like, so this past offseason when the Cubs went and they inked Yan Gomes and Tucker Barnhart, and they said those are our catchers now. And everyone was like, oh, like, they're going the soft skills route. And I was like, I looked at the system for the past like 4 years, and I was like, I knew exactly. I knew they were going that route because I look at the catchers in the system, and they're all those soft skill type guys.
Interesting.
Like,
okay.
Really good at managing a pitching staff, at controlling the run game, at framing pitches, at block. Like, they're all really good at that.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where if you can have outside Moises Ballesteros is a different story. He's
a thick boy who hits balls hard, and
Let me not get that confused that while I'm merging these two conversations.
Yes,
Moises Ballesteros is separate than this, but
and younger,
Pablo Aliendo fell into that category, right? And you're just hoping if those guys already possess those soft skills, if they can kind of take off with a bat at all, then you really do have something that could be a player at the major league level. Pablo Aliendo is a pretty damn good athlete, and he's always been a good athlete back there. It's like, all right, can he add some more muscle that he can actually hit? Because it was like a whole lot of singles because he could see the ball pretty well. It just the body wasn't there to get the ball out. He was like, okay, maybe he can hit a line drive double But now
what if Placido Polanco was catching? Let's do it.
Yeah. Honestly, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
But then he came back this year and like looked a lot stronger. He looked a lot bigger. He got the baseball butt a little bit, and so it was one of those things where the power came when he got bigger. He's another guy that's like pushing towards my like top 20. I'm a little more hesitant on some guys to like just throw them from like the 30 range into like the top 10. I've always been that way where I'm just like hesitant with guys like that. But
especially when it's a big outlier, and it seems like it's an outlier year for the baddies OPSing over 900 when I just saw it, and it's like, yeah, that was not what I thought he was, but he is to this point early on.
Yeah, you mentioned Bash earlier, the stat that I kind of came up with this past offseason. Basically, it's league adjusted, ballpark adjusted, and age adjusted, so that like if a guy is 25 years old playing in high A, like he gets dinged versus a guy like Owen Casey who's 20 playing in double A, like that plays up a little bit. Aliendo actually has the highest bash in the entire system this year.
Oh, wow. So okay.
That's worth pointing out for him for sure.
That is impressive. Greg, thank you so much for joining us here. On the way out, do you want to throw a Hail Mary? Tell me what prospect you think will make the majors that either that people don't see coming or that they might not see coming in this moment, or someone you just hope to see in the majors this year?
Yeah, I guess I'll go two names. Neither of them are like long-term like superstars on the Cubs, but two names that haven't been talked about all that much. One is Jonathan Perlaza, who's been mentioned more recently. He was kind of just viewed as like major league depth down at AAA. He signed back as a minor league free agent. He spent his entire career in the Cubs system. Has been absolutely killing the ball this year. At one point, I think he had like 14 doubles in 12 games, something ridiculous.
Dig it.
He's not going to be very good in the outfield. He's not a good outfielder, but he can play some DH and he can fill in the corners if you absolutely need him to. But he's a really good professional hitter from both sides of the plate. And then the other guy is Bailey Horn, and Bailey Horn has not been mentioned because he's
sneaky.
He's a relief only pitcher. Like prospects don't hardly ever get mentioned, and that's fair. Like I'm not asking for them to be. But Bailey Horn's been very good in AA and AAA this year. He's a lefty. I know we got the Mark Leiter situation where he's a righty facing lefties, but like you could always use another lefty in your bullpen. And I think Bailey Horn in the next, like, I'd say I would not be surprised by the end of June that he's like already logged several appearances.
I want to say in the Ryan Tepera trade, is that how he came over?
Yeah, he was.
Weird stuff. Follow Greg at Out of the Vines on Twitter. Please go listen to the Cubs on Deck podcast. Greg, any parting thought on your way out?
No, man, I appreciate you having me on. You guys, I say every time, you guys are part of my regular rotation in terms of listening. Every week when you drop the show. Give a listen, give a watch over on YouTube, over the Northside Bound YouTube page. We're going to be getting in over at Northside Bound into some real deep draft stuff, which draft stuff is not as much my thing anymore because we have Greg Zumak, who is an expert at that stuff. So we're going to be dropping plenty of draft stuff. We'll do a live draft show this year like we do every year.
Oh, that's fun.
Yep.
Heck yeah. Greg Huss, everybody. Go follow him. Thanks for listening.
But that's all I got. Have a great week, and we will be back next week. And listen to this. I'm going to manifest it right now. The Cubs will have won 3 straight games over the course of next week. Will it be these next 2 against the Pirates? Will it be a different string of games? I don't know, but I'm putting it out in the universe because I simply have to. I don't know what else to do at this point, so I'm going to try to manifest it. And you know what? We'll see if it works. Keep those receipts, and we'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye.